Hi guys, good evening. Today we are going to learn this things called REFramework. In previous class also we got all these things called what is REFramework, and we have already completed one program like that, how to get the path and how to pass the data in your config file, all the question answer. We have done the practically of about these things called REFramework. Today we are going to learn this things called REFramework. Any program we can do. Already I told you like that we can go for automate. Okay. So right now what I'm going to do right now is we are going to automate this particular one particular desktop application. That things we are going to do using these things called REFramework, and that things we are going to learn. Okay, so REFramework is totally based on your arguments and variables, you know that, and that we can pass the data in your config file, and we can automate the particular project using that config file and your orchestrator. Everything is already involved. Okay, so whenever you come to REFramework, that is the things you are going to understand here. We are going to understand all these things here. So right now, every time so you're going to for these things called run the particular program using these things called main, and there you can go for these things called run file, and there you can go for click. Okay, so right now if your application is open or closed like a normal sequence, also it's trying to launch this particular sheet, and right now it's going to read these things called sheet, and here I'm getting these things called column count equal to 3 and row count equal to 4. That is the things called C data it's reading. I'm checking for all these things, counting, and the data I'm getting all this data on the message box, and after that it's going to launch the particular software. That is the things called desktop application, and right now we're going for this things called admin password login, and right now it's going to pass these things called caching, not on stage, accept button, and after that it's going to take these things called next transaction, and it's going for this things called pass the data. Okay, so second transaction we are getting means my all the loop, my all the particular, it's called transition in this thing called state machine. We have learned also that part. So all this particular data, it's working perfect, and that things we are going to understand here. Okay, so that is the things guys, it's working through REFramework, and REFramework everything proper we have built, and right now the program is working on this particular application. The process is same for every particular application, the Google and all these things. Right now we are getting the proper things. Okay, so right now it's working, and the same program right now we are going to create here in front of you. How we can create here, let me go for that. Especially for creating this type program, I've created one documentations. Okay, so that things I'm going to share with everyone. So that documentations I'll try to show you that part, and that thing's not complete yet, but if you understand the documentations, you can go for each and everything. So how to create by UI demo. Okay, so how to create REFramework one by one, copy paste the UI demo Excel file in input folder. That things we are going to understand here. So first, what you have to go for that here in this particular, let me go for this particular same program, whatever I have done. If you are going for project panel, if you're going for file explorer, if you go for data, and if you go for config file. Okay, so the first part in config file, I pass this things called path of that particular software. The software is on my desktop. Queue part, like that, whatever the queue name, the queue name is this things called February queue. If you go to this things called orchestrator, that is things called February queue. And if you're going for this things called view transaction, so that transaction we got. Okay, so that is transaction we got. So that part right now we are going to understand here. Okay, so that is the way we can pass the data, and we can go for that. So that's why I'm going to create the new REFramework. For that we can go for this things called home. Okay, so let me go for this things called open this things called new UiPath. So that things also we can check. Okay, so right now I'm going to pass this things called UiPath studio. Okay, we are going for this things called create. Okay, so if you want to create REFramework, you can go here, and there you can create this things called REFramework UiPath. Okay, so only I'll try to pass this the name, that is things called REFramework, and there we are going to create this things called underscore UiPath program. Okay, so everything is same for desktop, web-based, any program you can go for same way. Let me go for that, guys. So right now we are going for this things called your particular program, particular REFramework that we are going for that. The first part is this things called we are going to upload the data on queue. So right now what you have to go for that, after launching this particular program, you have to go for data, you have to go for input folder, and there you can keep the particular Excel sheet data, that is the input data you can pass there. And let me go for that. We are going to pass here. Creating the workspace, same thing, whatever the project you are going to create. And right now we are going to pass the particular project. We can go for this things called data. We can go for here. Directly I can go for a file explorer. And here I'm getting this things called data. In data, there is an input folder. You know that what is the best practice. Till first day we are going for this things called input folder. Here I'm going to put my Excel sheet. Here I'm going to provide these things called Excel sheet. Excel sheet already I've kept on the particular things called your desktop, but only I'll copy this particular Excel sheet. I'm going for this things called either copy. We can go for this things called Control C, and same your particular project. I'm going for REFramework UiPath program, and we are going for File Explorer. And here I'm going to keep these things inside the data. We are going to pass inside this things called input folder. That's it. It's done right now. We are going to put. Okay. So according to this documentations, we have kept these things the UI demo copy paste into the input folder. Okay. The next part, edit the infit config file. We are going for this things called config file. This part already we have learned in previous class. The same thing I'm going to do right now. I'm going for this things called data. I'm going for this things called config file. We are going to open this things called config file. And in config file, 3 things right now we're going to pass. You can pass n number of things, whatever you want to go for. We are going for setting, and by default, we are getting this things called orchestrator queue folder. This part is not required, so I'm going to delete. And here anywhere we can pass this thing, the 3 part, that is the path, that is the asset name, and that is the queue name. Okay, so whatever I'm passing, this part I will going to pass in the coding part internally. Path, what is path of desktop application? Whatever you are going to use, the things right now, here I'm going for UI demo, so I can go for this things called copy the path, and this part I'm going to provide into this place like this way. Asset part we are also going to do. What is asset part? What is asset part? Let me go for this things called asset. Okay, so right now I'm going to create the new asset, whatever. I'm going for create this things called asset. So let me go for pass this things called fav asset data new. Okay, fav asset data. I'll go for double A because n number of things, and here I'm going for this things called credential, and here I'm going to pass this my credential, that is admin, and that is things called your password. We are going for this things called password. Okay, if everything is fine, so fav asset data, let me go for copy, and we are going to create. Okay, so that part we have done, and right now I'm going to pass these things. This is the value. Value means we can change after 1 month, 2 years, whatever you want. Again, here I'm going to keep the same name, any name you can keep here. I'm going to pass this things called Q data. Okay, we have passed this things called fav Q data, and same thing I'll go to my server. I'm going for this things called Q part. We are going for this things called add Q. Very simple. We'll go for this things called create a Q name, and I'm going to pass here, and simple I'll go for create. Okay, so there I'm going to create this things called fav Q data. Okay, that is things called fav Q data. There is a fav Q data. Okay, that same thing, fav Q data. Okay, everything same. Right now, my Excel part we have done, and you have to keep in mind that you have provided the path, you have provided the asset, and you have provided this things called Q part. Means this part you have to keep in your mind, or you can check after 1 hour also, 10 minutes also. You have to open the config file, but right now I'm going to remember this part, path, asset, and queue. That things it's done right now. Okay, so we are going to save my particular config file, and right now we are going to done. Okay, so your asset part, queue, and this part. Okay, we have done right now. Again, come to this part. We have provided this things called name. It's done right now. Everything done. After that, we can go to anywhere. We can come to this part. Init all application. Right now, what we are going to do, we are going to upload the data on queue. You know that how to upload the data on queue. Very simple. We have to go for that. Anywhere we can go for right now is main. We are going for this things called, let me come here, sorry. We are going for this things called this particular program. We are going to open this things called main. You have to start with the main. Okay, we have to start this things called main, and initialization is especially for doing all these things called initiate the application, whatever the application you want to go for that. But if you go for any particular program, you have to go for upload the particular program. Let me open all these things first. Let me complete, then I will try to demonstrate you. Okay, so anywhere, let me come here. I'll try to create here I'll try to create one particular sequence. So I can take these things called sequence flowchart. Any things you can take here, anywhere you can create, but here I'm going to create. And here I'm going to take the three things. Very simple, you know that how to upload that on queue. That is things called Excel application scope. You know that how to pass this things called data. We can pass here, that is things called Excel application scope. We are going for this things called rate range. You know that rate range for the providing these things called seat. You know that bulk queue item, that is for uploading data on queue. We can pass this things called bulk queue item, bulk add queue item. Let me pass. One by one, we are going to pass here. We are going to pass the particular path. We are going for pass this particular path like that. We are going for this things called data. We are going for this things called data. We are going for this things called config file. Okay, sorry. We are going for this things called input file, and we are going for this things called data. Again, data UI demo is done. Next part, what is this things called seat part? Okay, so whatever the seat name, you have to verify. Okay, so I have done, so that's why I know that is the deposit part, and that things also I'll try to show you. That is part input and UI demo, and that is the part this things called Excel part. And here I'm going for this things called checking this things called seat. You know that how deposit DEPO SIT. You know that best practice how to copy, but right now we have done DEPO SIT. It's done right now. Output you have to create, that we can go for Control K, and I'm going to create this things called DT underscore Excel OUT DT Excel out, whatever. Okay. Again, the things right now, especially for testing, as suppose that I'm getting the data or not, Excel is perfect or not. Okay. If you want to check all these things, you can count the column. There you can go for this things called DT Excel out dot column dot count dot toString. Okay. So we are going for this things called toString, and in starting again pass this things called column plus column count equal to this part. Okay, let me copy and let me paste for this things called your row part. We can go for right now. That is the things called plus sign, and we are going for paste. Right now, again, what is my next work? My next work is this things called row count. Okay, so I'm going to change all these things, and we are going for this things called row count. And here I'm going for this things called, instead of columns, I'm going for this things called rows. Okay, we have done right now. And right now we are going for that. Here I'm going to provide these things called space. Okay, if you want to display your whole Excel sheet there, you know that output data Excel and message box we can pass, and there you can go. I'm not going right now. Here I'm directly going for this things called your folder path. Okay, so here message box not required, only for testing I provide these things called message box, even not required to write all these things. Okay, you know that how to pass these things output data table, and you can display the message box. Okay, here I'm going for this things called path folder, that is things called testing folder. Whatever we are going for this things called testing folder. What is your queue name? What is your queue name? Directly we are not going to pass these things called name queue name, because tomorrow you're going to change these things. Okay, so we are getting one particular in config. Okay, so we are getting this things called one config file. Okay, so config file is the output of these things called one config file, and there we are going to pass the particular queue name. What is queue name? You know that the queue name is these things called QUEU. Okay, Q is the queue name, and here I'm going to pass the data table, that is things called DT Excel out. Whatever the data table you create, the data table name is dt.excel.out, and same part here I've created this things called DT Excel out. Same part I've done, nothing else. The config file output is this things called config file, and it's going to search only the queue. Whatever the input I provide, it's going to search. That is only for uploading the data on queue. That's it. Okay, that is things called uploading the data on queue. That things right now we have done. Okay, so here I've created this things called uploading queue, and here we have done this things called passing the Excel part. We are going for this things called retain. We are going for pass the name config.toString, and we are going for this things called passing the your data. Okay, so right now here create one folder inside your REFramework and rename your folder. Let me go for this things called REFramework. We are going for this things called project. Okay, we are going for this things called project. Here I'm going to create one folder, and you know that why we create the folder, that I'm going for this things called UI demo test. That is the folder name. That is the things called folder name, we're getting this things called your demo desktop. Okay, so right now I'm going to create one program there. We're going for this things called flowchart sequence, whatever you want to go for that, you can take here. Okay, we can take here. Let me take this things called flowchart. And right now the main launching page we are going to create UI demo automation. Okay, we are going for this things called launching. What we are going to do, you know that the first part we are going to take this things called get credential activity. Why? Because the password we are going to pass using this things called your asset part from orchestrator, and after that we are going for this things called open application. We are going for this things called open application. Okay, so get credential, what we are going for that, you have to open, you know that that is the things called testing folder. We are going for testing folder. Asset name you have to pass using this things called your particular things. Okay, so asset name you have to pass here. So that's why here I'm going to create one augment. Okay, augment, you have to understand this things called here I'm going to pass this things called credential. That is the in direction. I'm going to create this things called in underscore credential, and here I'm going to pass this things called in underscore one things called path. That is the things you will understand one by one. So I'm going to pass this things called in credential, and in credential where it's available, in credential all the credential available in your config file. Right now orchestrator is fine, but right now it's connected to the config file. That things I'll tell you right now. We are going for this things called asset name. That is things called your in credential. Right now done. So after get credential, here I'm getting to the open application. And when you come to open application, let me come to the open application, you spy the particular application. Whatever the application you're going to automate, that application you are going to launch, and you're going to come here. What you do, you try to come here and you pass the indicate on screen. Am I right? Like that you pass this things called indicate on screen. Am I right? So indicate, when you pass, you get this path. Am I right? You get this path. You get this path. Okay. But right now I'm not going to work on this particular path because everything is dynamic right now. We are going to pass this path, in path, and in path later you're going to understand all these things. Okay, right now only try to understand only that is the arguments, that is the in air, that is in totally in air. Okay, so right now it's this part is not connected. I'll try to show how we can go for connect. After that we are going for type into, that you know that type into, and in credential we have activity that name is called type secure text. You know that very well. Type secure text is especially for orchestrator and your window credential. We have done multiple times. Okay, so that things we are going for indicate on screen. We are going for indicate on screen, and we are going for this things called username. We are going for this things called password. Okay, and we are going for this things called login and click button. So we are going for this things called click. Okay, we have done these things called click. Okay, let me understand these things very well. We are not going to pass any password double quote, nothing else. How we are going for that? We are going for this things called get credential, and get credential return. What is return? ID, that is string, and password is secret string. Here I'm going to create control K, and here I'm going to pass this things called str underscore ID. Str password, we are going for this things called str underscore password, and automatically it will provide ID, that is string, password is secret string. That things also you know that. So that's why we have taken this part in this things called open application, and here we are going to pass this things called your ID, and here password. That's it. Password. Okay, so we are going to pass these things called password. So there is no any error. If you're going to pass the wrong variable, automatically you will get these things called error. Right now my work is done, but my whole program right now, the ID, password, the path of this particular things, it's totally depend on augment. This is the credential I'm getting, and that is things called input, and that is not connected yet anywhere. It's not connected, but till now we have done. Till now we have done. Okay, so till till now that here, let me come here. So right now we have done these things called get credential, and you get these things called augment start. Okay, after that here we have get these things called ID, password. That thing also done, and after that here take open application and provide the software path. Okay, so this part type secure text part also done, and you have to come here and you have to understand this part. Okay, so we have done the classes for these things for how to pass the message box and all these things. What you have to go for that? You have to go for Control F, and we are going to pass this things called init all applications. The same thing we have displayed for the message box. If you want to run any particular program, even message box, web-based anything, you have to come here. You have to come here. So first things, I want to go for run the particular things, that is the UI demo. And these things I want to run. So that's why I will drag and drop. I will drag and drop. If you want to go for any message box, you can take the message box and you can display here whatever we have done earlier. Hello REFramework. Okay, so hello REFramework. Right now, what we are going to do again here, please understand these things. When you drag and drop any things, whatever the arguments here you've created, it will automatically come this here. Right now, the arguments, your in credential and path. And right now, this credential and the path in the part of your config, and config automatically here I'm getting the particular argument, that is things called in config. And here we are going to pass these things called dot to string, and here the same config data. Your config data is this things called your particular things called your asset. We have passed this things called asset, and the same thing I'm going to copy. We are going for this things called paste here, and here instead of asset we are going to pass this things called path. Okay, that's it. We have done. Okay, so this part you have to keep in mind, the asset and path we have created here in the config file. Let me come here, and here if you come to config file, and if you're going for this things called config file, here I'm going for this things called asset part and queue part and path. Path especially for your place, and asset especially for your providing the queue. Okay, so queue part, and this using this part it will try to access here, and queue already we have done right now. Okay. So that is the part of this things called of your init part we have done right now. Okay, so this part asset path, so these things also I have mentioned here, that things we have already passed here, and right now that is the part of this things called launching this part, and here till now we have done. Okay, so again we'll go for the next part, and here we'll come to it. Okay, so right now whatever we have done, that is till your init part. Init part, what is this things called? Read the config file and initialize the application. Read means config done. We are going to launch, and we are going for application using process. If you are going to run till now, let me check. If you want, we can go for check that we are able to do or not. In that situation also, guys, please try to close your config file, because if you're going to open the config file, it will not try to go for run. Okay, so right now this program is working, and we are going for the whatever the program we have created only for these things called launching. We are going for this things called Excel sheet, and here only we are displaying these things called column and row here, this part, and we are going for hello REFramework, whatever I have written in front of you. And after that we are going for launching the particular your software. We are going for admin password, whatever the variable I have provided. Until now we have done. Let me come to the next part. Till now it's working perfectly. Okay, so we are getting there because you have not provided all the part. Okay, so when you complete this part, whenever you complete this part, we are going for this things called this part, get transaction part. Okay, we are going for this things called get transaction part. In get transaction part, very simple way I will tell you right now. Only we have one activity, and there we have to only pass this things called whatever the queue you are going to use, that queue details you have to pass. Nothing else you have to do. Okay, if you go for here, let me go for this things called get transaction. We are going for this things called get transaction data, and here you have to come here. Please understand these things. Very simple. I'll tell you right now. Whatever the path, definitely you have to come here, and whatever the path you are going to use, you have to pass the particular path. Okay, so that things you have to go for this things called, you have to pass it. Okay, so right now I'm going to pass, right now is here, let me come here. We are going to pass the particular path, that is things called testing folder, you know that very well. And here we are going to pass the same thing. Okay, we are going to pass this things called your queue part, and whatever you queue name, very simple, you have to pass this things called toString. And here if you come, you have to pass the queue name, whatever the queue in your config file, that we are going for that. And right now here, if you come to this particular place, if you come here, you have to create the particular variable, that is things called out transaction item. So whatever the data you're going to save here, if you want to check that we are getting the data or not, you can pass the particular variable, that is things called message box. And here we are going to pass the particular message box, that is things called your transaction item, whatever the out transaction item, that is the variable. And you know that what is the out of this things called transaction item, that is the queue item, that is the queue item, guys. That is things called, we are getting this things called out transaction item, that is things called your queue item, that is the queue item, you know that. Okay, so let me come here, and here what we are going to pass, we are going to pass this things called dot specific content, we are going to pass, and whatever the data you are going to take, we are going to pass a dot to string. We are going for this things called a dot to string. Till now, that is the get transaction item, nothing you have to go for that. And let me go for this things called come here. Okay, so get transaction data, only you have to go for this things called passing your data. That's it. You're going to provide these things, the details. What is the details? Again, I'll try to tell you. You're going to pass here, you're going to provide your folder path, whatever the folder, that is, we are going for this things called testing folder, that is the part of orchestrator. And after that, your queue data in config, it's going to take this things called queue, nothing else you have done. Again, what is your next target? The next target is this thing called process. Okay, so how it's going to work? The first part, launching get transaction, you will take the data, and the third part is going to process the data. After here, it will come to here, because login already done, and we are coming to the page. That is my page. That is my page, guys. You know that if you already launched any application, if you want to access, you go for attach window. We are going for this things called attach window. What we are going for that, we are going to open this things called process, and here I'm going for open workflow. That is things called process, and everything is blank. Everything is blank. You have to access, you have to start, you have to do all these things. We are coming here, and we are going to pass the attach window. We are going to pass this attach window, and we are coming to here. We are going to indicate on screen. We are going for this things called we indicate on screen, and here we are going to indicate on screen like this way. So we have already indicated. Let me check here, and we are going for like this way. So the zoom is coming. Let me come here. Let me indicate on screen. Okay. After that, what we are going to do? We are going for type into. Am I right? We are going for this things called type into like this way. Okay. So right now we are going for 3 type into 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Okay. So what we are going for that? We are going for this things called type secure text. We are going for this things called type secure text. Like this way. And we are going for this things called click. We are going for this things called click. And okay, so one by one, what you have to go for that? You are going to spy the particular window. We are going for this things called spying the scashing. We are going for this things called next particular things, that is things called honest check, and we are going for this things called the particular window, that is things called okay, that is the part called your third part. So right now, what we are going for that, here, you know that we are going to pass the same part, your config file. Everywhere it will come config file, but right now we are not going to use these things for config file. I will tell you why. Okay, this part also will go for very developable. The things right now, I will tell you right now, the kit transaction item, here I'm getting these things, the queue data. That is things called out transaction item, that is things called queue data, that is things called out transaction, that is the queue data. So if you are extracting the data in queue items, so if you go to process also, you have to pass in this things called your particular things called your transaction item, that is things called queue item. So that's why that right now the config file, all these things is done. Right now we have to take the data from queue, not from the config file. So that's why I'm going to pass the data in like that in transaction item, and we are going to pass the particular things. Let me come here. You know that in transaction item, you know that how to extract the data from queue, that we have already learned that part. And here I'm going for this things called dot specific content, and here I'm going to for this things called double quote and your a, whatever the data, that is things called a. Why I'm going to pass this things called a, please understand this part also. Why we are going to pass this things called a, because my column name is a, my column name is a. Right now we're going for this things called a. Sorry, here we have not changed. Okay, so let me go for pass this things called proper way. Okay, sorry, we have done. Okay, let me come here. What things we are going to understand, let me come here. The data we have kept not here, we have kept in this things called input part, and here I have done. Okay, here I have done the data, that was not data. Okay, so that was the desktop data. Right now here we are talking about that. Okay, so here also that is the data we are going to change. Let me check here again, and let me check this things called UIW. So here I'm going to change this things called a, because that is things called spelling part. Sorry, C, and here we are going for P. Okay, A, B, C, and this part not required. Okay, A, B, C, we are going for it. Okay, whatever the name you want to go for that, you can pass. So let me come here, guys. Okay, so right now what we are going to pass, that's why I'm going to pass this things called A. And let me copy this code. Let me copy everywhere, and we are going to paste. We are going to paste. And we are going to pass here, that is the C, that is the C data. That is the B data. So we are going to pass this things called B. We are going for this thing called click on the particular place. We are going for this things called click on the particular window. So whatever the particular window already we have launched, we are going for this things called launching this things called your UI demo. Here I'm going for this things called UI demo. I'm going for this things called, let me go for pass this admin. We are going for this things called password word. And we are going for login. Okay, we are going for this things called login. Okay, so right now what we are going for that, we are going to click on this things called this particular place, and I'm going for this things called click on the accept button. Okay, we are going for this things called accept button ABC, and we are going for this things called accept button ABC. We have done this thing called accept. In get transaction data, please understand these things. In get transaction data here, so right now if I want to check the data it's available or not, so what we can go for that, we can, okay, so here I can take one activity, and that activity is the this part, and we are going for display this things called A, and we have done this things called process. And let me check here. Right now it's going to work or not. Okay, so if you come to this queue part also, that is things called fab queue data 3 times. So we'll get this things called the data, it's already uploaded. So we are getting this things called the data as per Excel sheet, like that cash in data. Okay, so that type of data we are getting here. Let me come here. Okay, it's coming null, but we'll try to check here why we are not getting the data. Okay, let me close. Let me delete the queue part, and again I'll try to go for that fab queue data. Okay, fab queue data. Fab this part, am I right? Like that data. Fab queue data. We are going to delete, and again I'll try to create. Let me go for add queue. We are going for add queue and fab queue ue data, and we are going for click on use fab queue data. Okay. So let me check right now. That is things called, our name is this things called fab QUEUEDATA. Okay. So let me check in config file also that we provide the proper data or not. We are going for this things called config, and we are going for check this things called fab q data. Okay. Fab QUE, that is the perfect. Okay. So let me check that particular program, what type problem we can get here. So if you are going to create the program, 110% you will get the error problem, definitely, because you are beginners, you are new, even we also get the problem. So don't worry for that part. You have to work at least more hours, 1 hours, 2 hours, 3 hours for completing this type program. Okay, so let me go for counting. We are going to for message box. We are going for this things called launching this application. We're going for login. Okay, so right now the data it's displaying that we are able to get the data. Okay, right now we're getting the proper data and we are getting these things each and everything proper way. Next. Okay, so next data means it's saying that queue data, whatever you uploaded, I'm able to retrieve, means get transaction data also, it's working perfect, and we are able to get the data, and right now it's working perfect. The next data we are getting this. Why I have deleted this queue? Because whatever the previous queue we have run, the multiple data we have stored there. So that's why the fresh data I'm going to upload on my queue on server, and one by one we are getting the data from queue, and one by one we are going to automate the particular things. Okay, so right now here, whatever the data, limited data, whatever you have done, so right now it's working perfect. Okay, so again the things right now, the main part is this things is not coding. The main part is this things called understanding the concept of REFramework, how I have created, and if you understand the concept one time, you can create any time in your whole life. Okay, so that things right now we are going to understand, and how the REFramework is built, all these things we are going to understand. We are going to understand the first part, guys. I'll try to tell you right now. If you go for initialization in REFramework, what they have done, they have created the n number of particular program, and every particular program they have kept in these things called main part, initialization part, get transaction part, process part. The same thing what I'm trying to say right now is, whatever the program you want to automate, whatever the things you are going to initialize, every particular program you are going to kept in this particular init all application 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. So if you are going to automate the 100 programs, so 100 programs you have to create. The same thing REFramework has done. So REFramework want this things called, one particular things called your config file, and you don't have to worry for all these things. Config file automatically how it's going to work. If you go for initialization, it's going for system exception is nothing. So it will go for init all app, init all setting.xml file, and that is one YAML file. You don't have to worry for that how I've created or all these things. I'll try to show, but you don't have to touch this part. If you're going for this things called open workflow, it's going to pass this things called your read config file, and that is this things called in config file. So how it's going to read? If you click on this things called read, and you know that there is a data, and inside the data they're getting this things called data and config file. Using this things called data and config file, they are going to extract the data from this things called config file, and they have stored into this things called one in config file, and that is the particular things called, it's moving everywhere, the particular the data and the config file, and it's moving everywhere. Okay, So right now the out of this particular your init all application, that is this things called out config file, means the result of this particular program that they've stored in this things called particular program, that is things called out config file, means the whole result of the Excel sheet, means config file they've stored in this things called out config file. Let me come to the main. Let me come to this things called main. And if you click on import augments, the out config file, this part, only understand this things called this part, they've stored into one variable, and that variable name is called config file. That variable name is called config file. That variable name is called config file. And this is the things in get transaction data. Please understand these things. In get transaction data, if you're going for this things called get transaction data, so in get transaction data, let me come to this things called main. So the init all application setting I'm talking about, this the only try to understand right now is you don't have to go for very depth level. That is not required for you. Okay, so you are not like that you are product manager or you're going to create the one UiPath. Only you have to understand these things. Init all setting output is this things called out config. They provide these things called path, they provide these things called read range, after that going for these things called running, these things called seed and all these things. Only that they're getting these things called one output, that is things called out config. And that is my argument. If you go for main, main, I'm getting the output, that is things called out config, and they have stored into one variable, and that variable name is called config, and that is the main variable. Here I'm getting this things called config. The same part here, if you come to main, and whatever the particular queue I have created here in this things called this place. So here I've created this things called queue, and here if you come to this particular place, bulk queue item, that same part I have provided, that is things called config, and through config it's going to read the config, and we are getting this things called queue part. It's going to extract the queue part, that is the things called here it's going to extract the name, that is things called queue part. So queue part you are going to create, and right now it's going to retrieve the data from the queue, and right now it's going to uploading the data on queue. That is the things called uploading the data on queue. Okay, so right now we are going for that. Again, the next question, we have created the particular UI demo. We have created this things called one folder, that is things called UI demo, and UI demo I have taken this things called get credential activity, especially for storing the data into orchestrator, and that things we are going for this things called storing the data, and that get credential activity we have taken here. And in get credential activity, if you go inside that, we have provided the two part testing folder, that is the things called folder path, and asset name. Here whatever the things asset name augment you can create by yourself. In credential I've created, and one in path I've created, that is the augments, that is the in direction augments only I've created. And in credential activity here I've created. So in credential activity, get credential activity output is this things called ID, that is the username ID, and here we are getting this things called str password, that is the ID and password. The same thing here I have passed in the open application, that is the we have passed this things called ID and password. We have done, we have passed. So whatever the argument I have created, that is right now in air, but after that we have import this argument and we have done. Okay, next things we are going for this things called main part. Please understand these things. If you are going for main right now, again in initialization we have a one things called init all application. If you come here right now, we are getting this things called init all application here. Let me come here. Okay, in last we have a one things called init all application. Init all application, you know that your variable part is whatever you have done, that is things called config file. That is things called config file. If we are going for import arguments in init all application, what we have done, if you click on this things called open workflow, if you're going for click on this things called open workflow, means in the init in the UI demo we have created one particular two arguments, in credential and in credential and in path. But if you come to init all application, here in init all application, by default init all application arguments, it's created this things called in config file, that is things called in config file, and this part they have added here into this place. They have added it in this place like that in config file, and that is, you know, that is the variable, that is things called config file, and they have added using this things called in config file, and that data I'm getting right now is init all application. And if you go for this things called init all application, and if you go for import arguments, here I have passed this things called in config file from your Excel sheet, asset.toString in config path.toString. So right now it's trying to extract the asset name from the config file. It's trying to extract the path, whatever I provided in this thing's called config file, and it's going to automate right now. And here I'm going for this thing's called init all application, and that is the way the UiPath REFramework has done. So you don't have to worry for all these things how they've done. So only you have to know that which data I have to pass, which data I have to pass. That is the part of this things called init all application we have done here. Again, the next part is this things called main. Here the main part is done right now. We are going to automate. Okay. Again, the things right now that get transaction data. Get transaction data, what is the output? Get transaction data, what is the output? The output is this things called, they've created one output, that is things called your transaction item. That is things called your queue item. That is things called transaction item. You know that what is the out and in. Out especially for sending data. We are extracting data from the queue and we are sending to the another workflow. Okay, so the same part, if you're going to extract, we have given this things called out transaction item, and that is things called out, and that is the variable, the argument type is this things called queue item. That argument type is this things called queue item. So if you come to main part, if you we've already done more than 2 classes on the arguments. If you're coming on the main part here in get transaction data, here the get transaction data, here if you come to this things called get transaction data, we are getting these things called import arguments. Import arguments. So in get transaction data, they have done this things called out transaction item, and that is things called queue item. Means they are sending the particular arguments to the another workflow. If you come to main, and here I'm getting these things called import arguments. In import arguments, they've given this things called out transaction item. That is these things from the particular arguments, and we have stored in one particular variable, and that variable name is called transaction item, and they've stored, means everything we are getting into main. If you come to this things called variable part, if you're coming to this variable part, we are getting this things called transaction item. That is things called your queue item. This one, that is the things called transaction item. Means what I'm trying to say, if you're going to click on the import arguments, we are getting these things called transaction item. Means your all the data from your get transaction item, we are going to store into one place. That is things called transaction item. And transaction item, your all the queue data will be stored into one place. That is things called transaction item. And right now get transaction work is done. So our data right now we are getting into transaction item, and transaction item is already queue item. Your config file, all these things done right now. You don't have to worry for this particular things. You only have to worry for this things called queue item. Let me come to this things called next part, the process part. If you come to process part, if you're going to open the process part, we are getting this things called process.xml file. Nothing you have to go for that. Only you have to go for this things called simple import arguments, nothing else, and open workflow, nothing else. If you go for import arguments, right now I was getting the data in transaction item. I was getting the data into transaction item, and transaction item, they've given these things called, let me come here. So transaction item we are getting here. In there, there is a queue data. If you click on open workflow, we are getting on the same page whatever we have created. Whatever we have created. So if you come to this particular page right now, if you go for this things called arguments, we are getting this things called in transaction item, and that is things called queue item. How we got this things called in transaction item? In transaction item by default created by this things called UiPath REFramework, and this in transaction item, it's connected to main. And if you go for this things called import arguments, that transaction item, that is the variable, and that is things called one arguments. That is in transaction item is your argument, and transaction item is one variable. Transaction item is this things called one variable. Okay, so right now we are getting this things called using this things called transaction item in that variable. So transaction item is one variable I'm getting from get transaction. That is things called transaction item is your one variable. And this part, if you go for import arguments, that is the transaction item we've stored into one particular arguments, and that arguments name is called in transaction item. And in transaction item, I'm getting to process. Means in transaction item, I'm getting the data from queue, and one by one, we are going to explore the data, and we are going to provide the data. Okay, so right now here, let me come here, guys. And here, if you come to in transaction item, you can pass the dot specific content. You know that how to extract the data in transaction item dot specific content. So in transaction item, the name is very clear. In transaction means in means your arguments, and that is the direction of in. That is things called in transaction item. Everywhere you're going to pass these things A, B, C. So all the data we're getting the proper, and right now accept. That is the done. we have done right now. That is the part of process. That is the part of process we have done. So right now here, let me come in. Okay, so here if there is no any data, if there is no data, it will go for end process. It will go for end process. In end process, we are getting this thing called close.xml file. There is also nothing. You have to go for click on open workflow. And here, if you want to close the any application, suppose that you are going for if you're going for browser, if you're going for window, whatever the particular we are going to use, whatever the particular you're going to use, according to that, you can go for close or go for it. Right now, if you're going for close, you take this things called attach window activity. And here we can go for drag and drop this activity. That is things called attach window. And we can go for attach the particular things. Okay, so right now, whatever the place, right now you're on the same page, on this page. So we are going to indicate. And this particular process, whatever I have done, everything will be same for your web-based application, for desktop, for everything, it will be same. Okay, so for web-based application also, I'm going to share the data to you so you can understand all these things. So here I can go for it. Okay, nothing else. That is things called closed application we have done right now, and closed application, that is for the closing the particular things. Okay, so that is the main part, guys. You have to understand that we have done these things called save all option. There you can go for save all. Okay, that is things called your close application part. Okay, so that is the way we can create the RE framework. In RE framework, you have to go for any company across world. People are not going to ask these things, open the RE framework. 99.999, even if you go for $14,000 or $20,000 per month in India, across world, in US, no people is going to ask these things, open the initialization like this way. They are not going to ask. They are going to ask how to create the RE framework, what is the concept of RE framework, and how you can build these things called RE framework, the config file part, and how we can automate. If we are going to describe one like this one program, that is sufficient for any type of salary, whatever you want in the market. Okay, so right now here, whatever the program we have done, if there is system exception, if we are going to automate these things called installation, if you're getting any system exception, it will automatically try to go for close the program. If everything fine, it will go for these things called successful, and automatically it's going to automate these things called get transaction data, and it's going to extract the data from there, and it's going for these things called new transaction, and it's going to automate till here, and it's one-to-one, it's going to pass the data. So if everything RE framework is totally dependent on your arguments, variable, config file, asset, queue. Okay, so this is the part you have to understand. Every RE framework, whatever the provided by UiPath, everything is blank. If you are going to use, according with that, you have to pass. Let me come to this things called config file. Here, let me come to this things called config file. Okay, so suppose that here I'm going to for this things called path. Tomorrow, if you're going to use your path, you will come to this particular page, and here maybe in your system, suppose you're going to ask these things, how I can automate in my system. In your system, you have to go for that, and you have to pass your path. Your path means what? Whatever your system path, definitely you're going to pass. You're going to create one queue. Suppose that I'm giving one example, not writing here because directly you can run here. Suppose that your queue name is A, small a. You have created. So what you have to go for that? You can pass your path. Suppose that your path is like that. C, your users, whatever. Okay, so like it C, and your path is this thing is called UI. You have provided here. Okay, that's it. Means you will provide here, not here. You're going to pass these things that is especially for description, and we are going for pass these things called .exe. We are going for pass these things called asset. That name is A. We are going to create these things called A into Q part, and there you can go for pass these things called A. Again B. That's it. You can go for that. Okay, right now you can go for that. Suppose that already we have discussed that part. Suppose that you are not going for desktop automation. You are going for these things called your web-based application. Anywhere you can pass these things. That is things called URL. You're going to pass these things called URL. And here I'm going to pass these things. My URL, that is things called your google.com. That is this thing's called google.com. Okay. Again, if you're going to ask if I'm going to use these things called open browser, Google automation, what things it's going to change? What things we are going to change? So you have to come here to UiPath like this way. And here, very simple, everything is same. Only you have to go for init all application, nothing else. Init all application is this things called whatever the application you're going to automate, here you have to go. So there, what you're going to do? There, what you're going to do? You're going to create the particular one program. You're going to create this things called one particular program. You're going for this things called add, and there you can go for this things called folder, and there you can go for this things called BP table. That is the particular folder name. And here we can create the BP table. That is my folder. And here I'm going to create this things called add, and here I'm going to create this things called flowchart, and I'm going to pass this things called BP tables. Okay, that is especially for any web-based application, whatever you want to go for that. Right now it's not getting the error. Okay, so right now whatever the particular program you want to go for that, you can create like that. Okay, so right now it's not going to create. Okay, only I'll give this things called like that hint. Okay, so right now in UI demo like that here, so here instead of open browser, what we are going to pass, we are going to pass these things, the instead of path we can pass this things called in underscore URL. That's it. That's it. And here I'm going to pass this things called activity. We can pass this things called activity. That is things called open browser, and we are going to pass the particular things open browser. And here we are going to connect. After get credential also will be here. Only you have to pass this part like this way. And here in open browser, we are going to pass the in browser in URL. That's it. And we are going for this things called maximize window. We are going for this things called maximize window, and everything will be same. Your type into, type secure text, everything will be same for these things. Nothing will change. Type into, and it type into, and type secure text. Only have to go for this things called spy the part. And here you're going to pass the particular arguments. That is things called your variable. So we are going for this things called your ID. We are going for password. Okay, so you're going to pass here. That is the password. You're coming here, and here we can pass these things called password. Okay, nothing else you have to change. If you want to go for automate any like the web-based, you have to go for open browser. Nothing else to change. Only instead of these things called previous, we are going for open application, and you're going to provide the path. But here you are going for this things called browser program. You're going for in URL. That is the particular URL for that, and they're going to change, and you're going for that. Okay, so man, here in REFramework, only you are going to understand the concept of these things called how REFramework is going to work. Okay, don't go behind the product. Product is like that RPA UiPath product, and for creating the product, that company is working for last 10 years. Okay, so only you have to understand the particular framework, how it's going to design. And again, I'm telling right now, in any company, if the project requirement is only sequence flowchart, you don't have to go for REFramework. REFramework is that is the toughest, and that is for framework. Every company, it's not going for REFramework. If the required, if clients say yes, we'll go for REFramework, 100% will go for the REFramework. But normal automation, don't try to go for REFramework. If you're logical, conditional, multiple things, then we have to go for these things called REFramework. Already we have done these things called more than 2-3 classes on REFramework. Please complete. So right now I've delivered all these things, demonstrated all these things, how we can go for desktop, how to go for these things called web-based, how to create the, how to handle the orchestrator, how to handle the asset, how to handle the queue, and how to create the REFramework using these things. Okay, so documentations also I've created. Documentations I'm going to share with you. That is for queue item, that is for UI demo. For the web-based also I've created the documentations I'm going to share with you. So using the documentations, you can create any type of program in these things called REFramework, and you can go for the practice, and you can go for these things. So that things you're going for that. Okay, so guys, thank you very much for watching the video. Thank you.